May the peace of where the word of God is spoken. 15 years or so ago, we were navigating some very difficult times in our family. And so my prairie-born, prairie-raised flatlander partner decided that he wanted to climb a mountain. As you might imagine, I was very surprised. It was nothing that we had ever talked about, but I supported the decision. He was in touch with another prairie-born, prairie-raised flatlander friend who had recently taken up mountain climbing after his move to Alberta. There were lots of conversations and a date was set. They chose Eeyore, which is just across the highway from Canmore, Alberta. And that was the first of many mountains that were climbed in Canada, in Switzerland, and the big adventure was Kilimanjaro in Africa. Well, mountain climbing isn't easy. I think we all know that. It might look very straightforward. The mountain is there looming up in front of you. You can see the summit from where you stand. On some places, you can make out well-worn tracks and paths. And some mountains require going up and then coming back down so that your body and mind can sort of acclimatize to the elevation. And I've always thought that it must seem very counterintuitive to go up feeling that, boy, you're making progress, and then to have to turn around and come back down. But in the end, all you have to do is do it. Well, I was ground support, and not being a mountain climber myself, I can only observe. But one of the things that I know about mountain climbing is that you need to be prepared. A mountain excursion is not something to be taken lightly. You have to remember that all you need on that trek, you have to carry. You have to remember that you have to eat, perhaps on the way. And if you eat, it has to be something that is nourishing and light. You'll need snacks to sustain you because every step when you climb a mountain takes a great deal of energy and enough to drink because all of that energy that you are exerting makes you thirsty. And it might be very good weather when you start out the day, but in the mountains, conditions can change very rapidly. You have to take something to keep the rain out and the cold out. You'll need lots of kinds of clothing. You'll need clothing that can keep you warm or to help you cool off. You need something to protect you from the sun, not just a hat, but lotions and potions. And most of all, you need to be physically, mentally, and spiritually prepared for the trek. So now you're packed. You're packed up and eager. So let the climb begin. You soon begin to gain elevation, but there's still a very long way to go. The path may appear well trodden, but that does not mean that it's easy. There are rocky sections where you have to scramble, steep inclines where you have to get out of breath, and you have to hang on tight to little outcroppings where the path isn't clear, or you have to decide between two or more ways. There are rock walls that you have to make a tremendous effort just to move forward. And sometimes you have to remind yourself to not look back or to not look down. Progress is made and the summit gets ever nearer. You arrive at the top and you're panting, you're exhilarated, your face is glowing with the sheer effort and with the satisfaction of a job well done. You did it. It's great to be at the top, even if all you can see is the fact that you're inside a cloud. Well, I wonder how lofty Moses' holy mountain was, Sinai or Horeb. The Old Testament calls it. Did it tower thousands of feet above the people with its head in the clouds? Did Moses take a backpack with a map and his lunch and a flask of wine? Or was he equipped just with his staff and his faith? Because whatever it was that he had with him, he clambered onto the mountain's flanks because there was no well-trodden path there, and upward and onward into the cloud. And there he met the Holy One, beside whom all mountain grandeur paled in insignificance. Time and distance became as nothing. It was just the solid reality of God's nature and presence, and of the most intimate Holy Communion, in which Moses came to understand something of the underlying reality of the universe, and which he conveyed to the people, and he carved them in stone. And his face glowed. His face glowed, not just with exertion of mountain climbing, but because of the result of his exertions meant that he had encountered God. And in that encounter, as always happens with the meeting of spirits, something of the nature of the divine rubbed off on Moses, just as something of Moses' nature rubbed off on God. Neither Moses nor God would ever be the same again. But temporarily, the glory of God in Moses was almost unbearable. He had to cover his face so that he didn't frighten the people, and so they couldn't see the glory fading. And later on, he met God in the tented sanctuary. It may not have been up a mountain, but it must have needed just as much preparation, as much bravery, as much courage. For that journey of prayer into the presence of God is one of the most demanding any person can make, and few make it out unchanged. All through Advent, we use some reflections and words by Richard Rohr, and he writes this about prayer. I'm increasingly convinced that the word prayer, which has been a functional and pious thing for believers to do, was meant to be a descriptor and an invitation to inner experience. And spiritual teachers invite us to pray. They are in fact and in effect saying, go inside and know yourself. We have for too long insisted on outer authority alone, without any teaching of prayer, inner journey, and maturing consciousness. The results for the world and for religion has been somewhat disastrous. And I believe that to be so. Just as Moses did, and we must do, we must deepen our experience and relationship with God through prayer and meditation. That is where the transformation came for Moses, and that is where it is possible for us to experience that change. Mount Hermon stands in the north of the Holy Land, its top often glistening with snow. Come on, my friends, we're going mountain climbing, said Jesus to those around him that day. And up they go, one foot after another, higher and higher, rosy-faced from the exercise, following their guide, following their Jesus. And what they saw at the top required some mental and spiritual mountain climbing, for right in front of their eyes, Jesus was transfigured. His face was changed and his clothes became shining white, and those two holy mountain climbers from the past, Moses and Elijah, appeared to be with him. Now, it wasn't just the exhilaration of getting to the top nor the scarcity of oxygen so far above sea level. It was though their efforts in getting to the top had brought them also closer to the heart of God and to an understanding of the nature of Christ. It affected Jesus too, this mountain climbing, this divine summit. Revealed here in splendor, he was to go back down and into Jerusalem. And there he was to take up his cross. But for now, we see him here at the center of the divine presence in the cloud of glory. And we, the disciples, can but gaze in wonder and worship and try to grasp with our minds and our spirits the enormity of Christ. Steve Charleston, who is an American Episcopal or Anglican bishop and Choctaw citizen who walks a dual path with his Native American tradition and Christian faith, writes, "The New Testament is a vision quest story, an invitation for us to step into the vision quest of God. This quest is transformative. It is the earthbound story of a flesh and blood seeker who lives in the midst of the mundane, using what is at hand to turn the common into the extraordinary. And I suspect we'd be more comfortable, Moses, the disciples, and we, if we stayed on the ground and only attempted things at ground level. If we perhaps targets could be more easily achieved, although our faces might not glow with exertion. The voice is inescapable. Come up here, it commands, and make the climb we must, because it is only in the mountains, on the mountains, that the divine transformation happens. And the healthy glow we get from climbing becomes transfused by the radiance of God. Isn't that what we do when we are truly praying? We attempt mountains, Kilimanjaro even, not to move them, but that in them and on them we might be transformed. Isn't that why we must make the effort to find the time, the place, the energy to seek out maps and guides, to travel in company or alone, and there in the clouds, on the heights, God comes. And something of God rubs off on us, and something of us rubs off on God. Is that what we mean by prayer? Then we come down the mountain and go back into our normal life. In that normal life, Moses veiled his face so that the people couldn't see the glory. But surely if our God has transformed us, we want to show and share that with people, not out of pride or a sense of achievement for ourselves, but that the glory of God might be revealed for the benefit of humankind. Perhaps we might be those who write the guidebooks or draw the maps. Perhaps we might become the guides on the mountain tracks, helping others, helping the world toward the glorious transformation that God intends. So be mountain climbers. Do not be afraid. That is what Jesus tells us. Thanks be to God. Let's join together.